17th, going forward now session. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to ask Brother John Rowe to lead us in our morning prayer and the pledge of allegiance.
Our Father, we bow before you today just to thank your great and your wonderful name. We thank you this morning that you promised in the Word that righteousness exalts a nation. So God, we seek you today that you will help us to know what is right and what is, Father, truth today in all of our business transactions that we'll be dealing with today. Father, we're grateful that you promised to whoever would ask you for wisdom that you would give it and you would not upbraid. We just thank you for those promises this morning. We thank you for Jesus Christ who gave his life for us on the cross of Calvary. It's in his name we ask these favors, and amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Blackburn? Here. Mr. Deaton? Here. Mr. Flake? Here. Mr. Graham?
Here.
Mr. Howerton?
Here.
Mr. McNeely?
Here.
Mr. Mills?
Here.
Mr. Mumma?
Here.
Mr. Reed?
Here.
Mr. Ritchie?
Here.
Mr. Swafford?
Here.
Like everybody's present. If you all notice, the agenda has been amended. There's 3 things that I forgot to get on, and I take total blame for it. With y'all's permission, I'd like to ask you to go ahead and allow on there. Does anybody have any objections to it?
The third one that you may not have seen, there were 2 that Devin sent. The one on the land and the one on the airport. And the third one, Sam had some correspondence with Mike Rainwater with the AAC about our general liability policy, suggesting that we may want to increase the limits. So I did a resolution on that that's in your package, and that's the third item that we had to amend for. So there was those 3 items that all require some attention. I don't think they're really surprised. Evan just got behind on the 2 that she got in. I think she got the word late and didn't get them in time to get in the package. And this one with Mike Rainwater was one that Sam and I talked about, and we just didn't get it ready in time to get in the package. So it's something we need to talk about. Whether we do the resolution or not, we're going to have to talk about it. But I'd like to have the resolution on there again. So unless somebody objects, we can.
Do we need a motion to approve?
No, I think just if there's no objection, we can proceed with it.
I think we're fine.
Anybody object to it? Go ahead. The next item of business is disposition of journal proceedings. Approval of the previous minutes. Does anybody have any objections or corrections?
Move to approve.
John moved to approve.
Second.
Mark second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item of business is public comment. 3 minutes. Anyone have anything to say? Dwayne?
If I may address the Quorum Court for a minute, you each have go ahead, John.
Just a point of reference, he's brought to us a sheet that comes from the Boone County judge regarding Crooked Creek when that ADEQ was talking about it in a hearing. They had great success in it. Dwayne's going to go over it a little bit with us regarding Kings River and the hearing that they're having down there today, I believe.
There's a public comment session going on at ADEQ. We have to have our comments faxed by 4:30 this afternoon. What we simply want to do is try to reiterate exactly what Judge Norton asked them to do in his public comments to them. Then you can read through that, and I'd like for you, if you want to sign the petition, I'll be outside after QC is over. We can do that then. All he simply did in this letter was ask them to go by the law when they were determining the impaired status of a river. And he cites all the laws in this document right here. And we simply want to reiterate that for Kings River. Kings River is an impaired waterway, and they have to review those every once in a while. That review is now. And we just simply want them to go by the law when they go ahead and call it an impaired waterway again. And by the way, they call it impaired and they say the problem is total dissolved solids, but they say they're unknown. So how can you fight an unknown enemy, or how can you legislate what you don't know? And so we just really want them to go by the law down there in their review of Kings River.
Thank you.
I'm not sure I understand the implications of this.
ADEQ pretty well makes the rules up as they go along, as you well know. This letter that I would ask that each one of us sign just states we ask them to go by the law that's on the books. Plain and simple. The law will protect us. And as Dwayne stated, it's all cited. The Boone County judge sent this to them, I don't know when, a while back, last week, when they were looking at Crooked Creek. And it's my understanding they come out all right on what they decided about Crooked Creek.
I have the EPA document stating that Crooked Creek will not be a TMDL, which is a huge victory for Boone County.
Ron?
I'd just like to comment that the Kings River Watershed Partnership does regular testing of the Kings River. And we have a 8 or 10 year log of the makeup of the river and the solids and the other things they're interested in. And I think that the reason we've been doing that is to try to protect us on something like this when they do come in. So, yeah, I think we should all get behind this, and we'll get the Kings River information to them from the partnership. That's all, I think, prepared and ready to go so that we can try to avoid this.
Can someone tell me what a TMDL is? What it stands for?
It's
I don't have that information because I've never had to do it for Carroll County, but it's another form of legislation that adds higher restrictions to the creek itself. I know that in a nutshell is what it does. We can get it. I can get somebody. I just found out about this Wednesday night. I had time to look everything up.
yeah, I've seen it before,
I don't
and I can't remember.
like dealing with acronyms. I don't know what they stand for.
I looked it up once and forgot it.
And
The
bottom,
name, the words don't make a lot more sense than the acronym.
and the bottom line on this is we may not like the law 100% on Kings River, but we'd rather have the law as for them to make up the rules as they go along.
That's right.
Anyone else?
So, again, I encourage everyone to sign his petition that he's going to put on a cover letter on this and under our county logo.
This would be consistent with our recently approved land management plan, right?
Absolutely.
So it's totally in sync with it.
Yes.
This is what we intended to do there, so it would be looked on as something other than what we are already intended to do.
And I'd also like to thank Wayne and George, because I know they're both, I know there's some others that do too, but I know these two put in a lot of time on kind of keeping us informed on things like this that are coming along and helping protect us on it. We appreciate it.
Yes.
You're welcome, members. Thank you.
Any more public comment? If not, we'll get to the next item of business. Next item of business is Mr. Wayne. Bob?
I promised Cindy that I would keep this brief today, so. But there's a few things I would like to cover is that I told you at the end of last year our concern was because the state had done away with the overcrowding conditions in the state prisons, that there was going to be a loss of revenue to us in housing prisoners. And sure enough, the first month of this year, we only got about $700 in revenue from the state from housing prisoners. But the good news is that I was looking at the sales tax, and the sales tax for January of this year was $5,000 more than any other year going back to 2005. I guess the weather has been good for us, so that brought in some tourism. So sales tax was up $5,000. And last time that I spoke to you, I explained that there was a line item I never discussed before about the cash bonds, and it was $400,000 that we received in cash bonds. it just made me think that if we had that much in cash bonds, should we be having more in bond fees? Well, when I checked into it, in 2005, the law was passed where you can charge a $20 fee for cash or pro bond. Didn't make any difference. Any bond was a $20 fee, so we've been collecting $20 on the pro bonds, but not on the cash bonds. So we immediately changed that, and that's going to make probably about a difference of about $8,000 a year in revenue just from the fee we charge in cash bonds. The other thing, last year, you approved for us to go out and bid on the ambulance from Eureka Springs because our crime scene vehicle was breaking down at every crime scene. And from every crime scene, we had to tow away our crime scene vehicle because it was breaking down. Being a gas engine, it wasn't holding up to the hours that we had it there. So we just got finished with taking care of it and getting it all ready to go. I just want to let you see what it looks like. The last thing I wanted to discuss is in January we had our Sheriff's Association meeting in Little Rock, and Ralph Ohm, who is a legal attorney for the Sheriff's Association, also has the risk management for counties just like Rainwater does. He, in one of our breakout training classes, they were talking about comp time, and we had a representative from the Department of Labor. And Mr. Ohm didn't go into detail, but he explained that in a lot of the counties, they have lawsuits because of the comp time. He didn't go into detail. But with the comp time, and I'm assuming where the issues are, is that when it comes to comp time, the employee has the right to determine which day they want off. And the employer, if that time is available, they don't have any, is not detrimental to the operation of the sheriff's office or the jail, can't approve that time off. But if it doesn't, he can deny it. So I'm assuming there must be lawsuits stemming from that. When I started to look at our time sheets and how we're reporting it, we've been reporting all hours for law enforcement between 80 and 86. We've been reporting those hours as comp time, whereas the comp time hours only begin at 87. Which means if you look at the comp time report that you get from Jamie, looking back last year, probably 55% of the hours being reported as comp time should be straight time. So what I have done, another issue is that, I gave you a copy of the memos, is that if you don't state a period of time in which you would like for an employee to use a comp time, they have a right to accrue it to the end of the year and get it in a lump sum. So that's why one of the memos that I gave you, we're trying to get them to use any comp time hours they earn, use it up within 30 days. We know we can't do it in all cases. There can be some carryover. So that we're going to be changing reporting to that. And then again, we're changing our timesheets to show a separate column for comp time as well as straight time that they accrued after 80 hours. So I include that in the memos to give you an example as to how it's affecting us.
Sheriff, just to try to understand that better, as I understand it, law enforcement personnel can work 171 hours in a 4-week, 28-day period.
Correct.
So we do 2-week pay periods, so they can work 85 and a half hours each pay period without going into overtime.
Without becoming time and a half.
Right, as on a straight time basis.
Right.
So that 5.5 hours per pay period, you're saying should be carried in a separate category from comp time.
Correct.
But maybe I'm confused. Is all comp time time and a half?
No.
No.
So
anything above 86.
right. So we've got comp time in here that is straight time.
Yes.
It's just shown in the same category as the time and a half comp time.
That's correct.
Okay, so we're just to look at there's one guy here who's got 84 total hours. Some of that is time and a half comp time. Some of that is straight time comp
Yep.
time.
But understand that time and a half has already been built into those hours that you're seeing.
Okay, so a portion of those hours are calculated at a 1.5 time rate, and a portion are calculated at a straight time rate.
Correct.
Okay.
So what we're going to try and do, we're going to have to work with is that either we can pay it off as they earn the straight time, but in our budget, the salaries don't include that. So therefore, we don't have the money in the salary line to pay the extra time.
Don't we have the money in the overtime line to pay the extra time?
Yeah, but the straight time's not the overtime. That's the problem.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Okay, so the extra 5.5 hours can't be paid as overtime. They're not overtime. And we don't have the money in the budget
For that line item.
for that line item.
So the good news is that we have never had, there's no problem with anybody being owed any money, and the pay has been correct, it's just that our reporting of the comp time has been incorrect. It's been very
Is
misleading.
the resolution, the money thing, just to transfer some money out of the comp time into straight time?
Well, we can change the overtime line. We can amend the budget, I guess, to change the overtime line and move some of that money into the salary line.
Right.
Okay.
But like I said, as far as any employee being, cheated out of any money, do we owe anybody back money? No, because at the end of each year, when we do the cleanup, we've had the core project, and that money has been used to cover any comp time for the sheriff's office. And really, the 12-hour shift has been working out very, very well. The amount of comp time that's being earned is being decreased. What is being earned, they're now working it off. So we're seeing in the jail, we're seeing a decrease in the comp time. And it's going to be a lot easier to manage some straight time than it is the comp time.
All right. In the detention center, we incurred 260 hours this month, last month.
Yes.
Is that decreasing?
Well, understand too, like the other day, we don't have control of, is they had circuit court. We had 20 inmates that went to circuit court. Several of those inmates, we had to go to ADC to pick them up to bring them to court. Then we had a prisoner we had to pick up in Chesapeake. And so that was about a 24-hour drive for two jailers to go to Chesapeake to bring the prisoner back. So there's a lot of issues that are going to come up. But yes, look, if you look at the timesheets for this month, this paper, you're going to see very little content.
Can you tell me how much we paid off last month in cleanup? I had the figure broken down, but they're at home, and I can't remember what it was, but it was an enormous amount.
Yes.
I'm thinking, am I wrong, wasn't it in $40,000 range on all three departments?
That I can't tell you for sure. But the thing is, for example, when we had the murder case out on Oak Grove, that occurred on the weekend, and you had 5 people out there working that murder scene, and there's just nothing you can do about it. Can't institute.
And when we have an ice storm in the road department, there's nothing we can do about it. They're out there doing comp time, but then they take it. And as far as the lawsuits against on the comp time, whatever, the state does it. All the state employees, the road department guys, they bill comp time. They don't get overtime, and they take it or lose it.
Well, maybe we can look at in the personnel committee, we're looking at policies and the handbook, and maybe we can look at tightening up some requirements on taking comp time, like along the line of what the sheriff's talking about. They take it within 30 days. Somewhere there has to be a line where we can comply with the state and federal law and forfeit that comp time if they haven't taken it. And look, we're working on a lot of things in the personnel committee, and that's something we can work on, is trying to figure out better way to handle comp time.
One thing I would just suggest, I would never come up with a policy you use it or lose it. Because you're opening the doors to the Department of Labor, and that could be a very serious issue.
As long as we follow, I'm sorry, as long as we follow the state and federal guidelines, we have no worries there.
Joe?
Bob, if somebody takes comp time, you don't have to bring somebody else in, do you?
In some cases, we do.
Larry?
My only thing is, we're building so much comp time, it multiplies the time and a half, and we end up paying it all. I mean, you'd be better off to hire more people and do it at straight time, but we've heard that song and dance for 20 years.
Well,
That if I have more people, and that,
yeah, but the problem with more people is you build your payroll, and our biggest expense is personnel. Our biggest expense in the county is paying our people. So granted, we can save some on comp time, but then we've got people with benefits, and comp time doesn't increase our benefit costs, and so it's a balancing act. And I don't know what the answer is, but it's the type of thing that we're trying to work on.
Well, the one thing I have never asked for additional people to cover comp time.
what?
No, I haven't. I've never asked for additional positions to cover comp time. Where we've been saving the money, and why we have the money every year to cover the comp time is due to the turnover that we have in the jail. There are many vacancies that we're not paying them salary, so a lot of times that savings, that's the money that's been going to pay the comp time.
Well, we have been told sitting at this table, that you may have not walked in here and said, I need 2 more people to get rid of comp time. But you've made the pitch for more people, and this will also help cut down on comp time.
The only pitch I made for was part-time people for the jail. But the only thing is,
Was it
because of the
not supposed to
turnover, the
help cut
part-time
down
people
on comp
became
time?
full-time within a short time.
My recollection of the comp time thing was partially with the court bailiff. We wanted part-time, remember when the full-time bailiff left the judge's office, we transferred that position over, and now we have, I think, 2 part-time bailiffs who work part-time for the court, that one position we had, and we increased it another position, so they work part-time for the sheriff. Right? That was one additional employee that we got, and that was to reduce the comp time involved in having regular deputies handle the bailiff as well as the other things. And that's, I recall talking a lot about comp time when we were working on that. That should save us comp time. I hope that has. Has it?
Well, no, the benefit of having the 2 bailiffs, when they're not working for Judge Crowe, they're working for us, is that they're out there, the people serving our warrants. Now, because of our warrant detail, is that we have been able to stay on top of warrants because they are the ones, when they're not working for Judge Crowe, they're out serving warrants, but they're serving the civil papers.
But the bottom line on this is, as I understand it, is that a portion of the comp time that you show here is at straight time.
Yes.
The other department's comp time is all going to be at time and a half. Am I correct on that, Jamie?
Well, to begin with, everybody just needs to understand, comp time does not mean overtime. Comp time is time worked over your regular scheduled hours. For instance, courthouse employees are 35 hours a week. Say my election coordinator, we have an election, she has to work over. She does not start accruing time and a half until after 40 hours. So with the sheriff's deputies, they don't start accruing time and a half after 85 and a half hours if we do the 171 at 28 days. Now, Sheriff, I've also looked into it with the labor board since you've come to me, and I think the personnel committee need to discuss it because we can go on a 14-day, and that is how Pam calculates it. We do it on a pay period. We're not doing it on a 28-day. So we got to watch, But with my report for comp is straight time in overtime. Yeah, comp time is
So if somebody worked 1 hour of overtime, they're entitled to 1.5
Time and a half.
hours of calm time. So this report reflects 1.5 hours
Correct.
rather than 1 hour. So everything here, it's all apples to apples. It's all total hours due.
Correct. Correct.
Regardless of what it
Like-
started out as, it's total hours due.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's straight
It's
time,
That's
no-
straight time.
And
because the 1.5 goes into the hour.
Is already in
It's
there.
already in
It's
there.
already
Comp
built
is
in, so
included.
it's, we're looking at total hours due for comp time. Well, to me, it seems like a dog chasing its tail. We have people go take comp time, but you have to have others come in to cover them, and it's a vicious cycle that we need to figure out a place to stop it, and we just keep going around in circles.
Well, I'm hoping that we can, in the personnel committee, get Jamie and the sheriff and the various department heads in and work out some policies. We've struggled with comp time as long as I've been here, and I think as long as Larry's been here, which is 47 years.
Well,
I
it's
think.
his fault, too.
He hasn't solved it yet.
He's the one who's brought that.
All I know is I see 600 hours in the last month that we occurred in comp time.
I know, we run comp time, but it's gone on forever, and maybe we can figure out some things to do.
And if it would help, Larry, I mean, Pam or one of the sheriff's secretary could do the bookkeeping on this, because I do my comp report that way. I reviewed it with the auditors. That's how it's been done. That's how they like to see it. But maybe the sheriff each month, I don't mind putting it in a packet where Pam could break down, or one of your secretaries, that actually shows the straight in the overtime.
Well,
But
that's what we're doing.
comp,
The timesheet this time.
I know, but it's not working with that comp report, so I think we're all going to have a meeting on how we can figure
Also,
that.
one last thing, real quick.
Yes, sir.
We've occurred that I see on quick glance in 3 departments, 600 hours of comp time, and we took 51. I'm done.
I'll have my last say, and then I'll be done. Now, again, the only reason I'm bringing this to your attention, it's not that we had any problem with anybody being old, back pay like we did a couple years ago. The pay has been straight, it's just the hours not being reported properly. The main reason for doing this is that other counties are in the midst of lawsuits because of the comp time. If it's not being reported properly, if you're not allowing an employee to take the time off because they dictate what hours they want off when it's comp time. You can only approve it, and if it's not detrimental to your operation, you can deny the comp time. So you can never wipe it all out. But the thing is, what we have to do is make sure that it's being reported properly. And to make sure that we have an avenue so that we don't get involved with, like some of the other companies that are going through lawsuits. And again, Ralph Holmes did not go into detail on either one of them, but apparently the recommendation he made is to put everybody on salary. Nobody be an hourly rate, make everybody salary, but you can't do that.
And I think, Larry, when the deal on the comp, now, I do believe the sheriff's lost a few of his dispatchers, and we are accruing some there, because we're shorthanded on dispatchers. So,
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you. Next item is number 8 under old business. Ms. Jamie, will you read that?
Move to read by title only.
Second.
Ron moves reading title only, Lamont second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
be it enacted by the Quorum Court of the County of Carroll, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled, an ordinance allowing continued business between the county and 2 local banks. Third reading.
Joe moves to adopt.
Joe?
Jack second.
I'm sorry, it was Mr. Mills and who? Thank you.
Any discussion? Call for the vote.
Mr. Blackburn?
Yes.
Mr. Deaton?
Yes.
Mr. Flake?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Howerton?
Yes.
Mr. McNeely?
Yes.
Mr. Mills?
Yes.
Mr. Mumma?
Abstain.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mr. Swafford?
Yes.
Third reading, and I believe
That's good.
we're done with it.
Be it enacted by the Quorum Court of the County of Carroll, State of Arkansas, an appropriation ordinance to be entitled. An appropriation ordinance amending ordinance number 2011-36, the 2012 budget ordinance, and transferring monies from the 2011 carryover from Fund Number 18 Drug Court to the 2012 budget for Fund 18 Drug Court, Office 1900, line item 27, other sundry. Now therefore being enacted by the Quorum Court of Carroll County, State of Arkansas, that the sum of $573.13 is hereby transferred from Fund 18 Drug Court to the 2012 budget for Fund 18 Drug Court, Office 1900, line item 27, other sundry.
Move to adopt.
Ron moved to adopt.
Second.
Larry second. Any discussion?
This is just money, this is money that is going to be spent. It just didn't get spent last year, so we're transferring it to this year's budget. So it can, the drug court is a small operation, and they just didn't get this money spent. It's going to need to be spent, and so we're transferring it to this year's budget.
Dan?
Yeah, that's point of clarification I was looking for, only because in our budget deliberations, I was thinking this would be one of those things that wouldn't have to be an ordinance this time around, because it's within, but it's because we're taking money from last year
Right.
to this year.
It's last year's budget.
They had more money left over
Yeah.
than what we thought.
I understand, but this would have been, if this was this year money, this would have been one of those things we would not have
Yeah,
had.
we wouldn't have to.
Any more discussion? Call for vote.
Mr. Blackburn?
Yes.
Mr. Deaton?
Yes.
Mr. Flake?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Howerton?
Yes.
Mr. McNeely?
Yes.
Mr. Mills?
Yes.
Mr. Mumma?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mr. Swafford?
Yes.
Next item of business is under B. Would you read that, Ms. Newman?
Be it enacted by the Quorum Court of the County of Carroll, State of Arkansas, an appropriation ordinance to be entitled. An appropriation ordinance to establish and fund a capital improvement fund for major repair and improvement of county roads. Whereas Carroll County has many county roads in need of extensive repair and improvement and does not have sufficient funds in any single year for a major project. And whereas the road department has carryover funds available. Now therefore being enacted by the Quorum Court of Carroll County, State of Arkansas, that the county treasurer create a fund to be called Road Capital Fund and transfer thereto the sum of $200,000 from Fund 02. No amount may be expended from this fund without prior approval and appropriation by the Quorum Court.
Move to adopt.
Ron moved to adopt. Joe second. Any discussion?
Yes, please.
Ron?
I've talked to Cindy about this, and we have approximately $1.4 million in the road carryover fund. Cindy thinks we're in good shape and that we can do this, that it will work. And this is just to try to build a fund so we'll have money to do some of these major projects that we can't do. We've got these chip and seal roads that need to be completely redone. And if we're ever going to do that, we've got to have enough money to do it. And we can't take it out of a yearly budget. So if we build up some funds, we should be able to do that and maybe eventually do some big projects. Cisco Road, some of the others that need done. I know Sam's been successful at getting the state to do a couple of these for us. They did 219 out in my district. They're doing, what are you doing? 327 now, and the state does those. But we need to do some ourselves. We've got lots of miles of this, and this is just a way to start putting some money together when we have a little extra so we can do it. So that's what this is about.
Any more discussion? Guys?
It's not money can be better used this year on one, any projects you got going on, but it might work better then than holding it back to do it later.
Well, I didn't think so, and Sam and I have talked about this. We have the money that we're dedicating for the equipment, and so we're getting them equipment. This is money from last year that isn't budgeted. They've already got their budget for this year, so this is additional money that won't be spent this year anyway, unless we have some emergency. If we have an emergency and have to use it, we can pull it out. But the purpose is to try to build up a fund big enough to do a big project.
John?
Explain to me why the money is more readily available to the road department under this than it would be if it just stays where it is now.
the carryover fund is, Cindy handles carryover. Carryover is what's left over, what you don't spend in a year. We have these big carryover funds. The money is available. It's there in the county treasurer. This, and Cindy can probably explain this better, this just creates a fund that shows you what you have for this purpose. Cindy?
We're using some of these terms not incorrectly. The carryover was actually 12,000 less than what I anticipated. However, the road department does not budget a full 90% of the money that is going to come in. Okay? We get close to $1 million turned back from the state, which goes in to the road fund with the taxes and everything. It is not technically extra carryover, but it will be extra road money that we have not budgeted. And we should not budget more than 90%, but we never budget that much of the road. So it will be money that comes in this year. But we can go ahead and put it back now if that is what the court wishes to do.
Well, my understanding is we take it out of the general pot and put it in a specific pot.
It is in the road fund.
Right.
And so if you want me to create a fund for this capital project, I will go ahead and take that out this month. And with the month-to-month expenses of the road, I don't expect that this particular ordinance will be of a detriment to the regular operating expenses of the road.
Larry?
Once this fund's established, to use the money out of this fund, is it there to be used by the road department, or will it have to come back to the Quorum Court for project, or what?
We have to approve the project.
Okay, well,
This is Cindy suggested we call it a capital improvement fund. We're going to do capital improvements with it. It's, unless there's an emergency, we're not going to use it for regular repair or equipment. We're going to save it for a large capital improvement project. And that's all this is about.
This all seems to be just a reserve to me. Anything that is spent by a governmental entity in 1 year is part of its reserve. I was going to save this part of the discussion until we got to the courthouse, but it seems to me that there ought to be an overall capital improvement long-term plan for the county in terms of what we want to do for the next 5 years or so before we start wheedling out 200,000 here and 200,000 there. That's what really bothers me about this. I'm not opposed to the concept of putting money aside in a specific fund, but we're doing it helter-skelter rather than part of an overall plan. So while I am in favor of what you want to do, I'm opposed to this because I would rather see it part of an overall scheme.
I believe Joe was
He answered my question.
Jack?
Question, Jamie, is it better to have a designated reserve when you're talking to the auditors than an undesignated reserve?
Well, if we designate it, it's kind of two-edged. I mean, should we need it, and then we go back in a year or two and say, well, this was set up only for capital projects, then should we need it for regular operating expense, we might have a little trouble. We would have to rescind this ordinance and say that ordinance is rescinded and that we can use it for general purposes.
Well, that was what I was fixing to ask. If we put this in there, if we could, if we had a flood or an ice storm, if we
We
could
could rescind this and appropriate it somewhere else in one ordinance.
You would have to do that, yes. Once you designate it as capital, it becomes capital. And no matter what hocus pocus you do in an ordinance, it's capital, and you run into a problem. Otherwise, then you have to go back. So, yeah.
We can call it road reserve fund if you would like for it to have a broader use.
But it already is a reserve. It already is our reserve. I mean, the whole pot is the reserve.
Words are important. And reserves, carryover. I don't like the word extra road money because there is no extra road money in this county. I think capital makes me think, and this is what our conversation, I think, started on in the budget committee in discussions we had with that. I think of equipment purchases as opposed to SB2 base rock and hot mix and cold mix and all that. I like the idea of saving money for unforeseen equipment. If a dump truck rolls over in a ditch and hopefully nobody will be hurt, but you got to buy a new dump truck, or you got the backhoe burns up or whatever. So I'm all for it, but I'd like to see it narrowed down than just a capital fund. I'd like to see a capital equipment fund as opposed to materials, or these are a little tighter.
Ron?
I'm not married to what we're saying here. I think Lamont hit where I'm trying to go, and I've been trying to go for a long time, is we need a capital improvement plan for the county that includes roads, courthouses, all county buildings. Maybe we need a county county building committee to sit, or a county planning committee to sit and plan these things, and then we set them up. I did these ordinances just to try to get some discussion and some movement in this direction. And I did, a couple of years ago, we did the courthouse improvement fund, just to have some money, because we've got security changes and costs coming up. We've got repair changes and costs all the time. We've got serious problems with both our courthouses that are going to cost us a lot. I thought, since we don't really have a long-term plan for courthouses, we ought to have some money set aside so we can do what we need to when the time comes. And this was an attempt to do the same thing for the roads. I welcome a discussion about setting up some sort of long-term county plan, and I agree completely with what Lamont said. I'd rather do that and put the money in than put money in. But so far, we haven't been able to accomplish anything except create the courthouse fund, which was hard fought and close anyway. And I welcome any other involvement anybody else wants to do.
As an alternative, we had really good success with the budget committee. The personnel committee is meeting regularly. Perhaps the judge might consider at some time setting up a long-term planning group, because of doing it in a small group and then bringing it to the larger body seems to be an effective way of wheeling down the details and bringing something tangible before the group. My preference would be to have some type of overall plan, and then we say, okay, our goal is to have $1 million in 5 years for a particular project. How are we going to accomplish it? So when we transfer $200,000 into that fund, we're doing it based upon an agreed-upon plan.
And I agree with that. I'll withdraw this if we want to try to go that direction. But I haven't seen there is no movement in that direction other than these ordinance I brought. So if the consensus is that we ought to set up something to do some planning, I'm all for that. I'll withdraw this. Otherwise, I want to try to set up this fund as a first step towards some sort of planning.
The question would be if Sam may already have a plan and he needs to share with the Quorum Court or the county. He may already have long-term plans. So that would be his call.
I'm curious to see if the committee can sit down and come up with a plan on county roads and override the county judge on what roads he wants to fix 3 years from now, because it's the county judge's call. As far as saying, we're going to save up money till we can fix such and such road. That's locking the county judge in.
If I could respond to that, I agree with you. I think the committee would be a help to the judge. The judge has final say on the road, but I don't know. I don't think Sam has a plan. We've talked about planning, and it's very difficult to plan, and you start committing to certain things, and people expect it, and that makes it difficult. Also, we all, including the judge, serve 2-year terms, so you don't know who's going to be the judge in a year, and you don't know who's going to be sitting here in a year. And that's why it's one reason it's so difficult to plan.
1, 2, 3.
Well-
Which is first?
Well, that's what I was fixing to say. As far, I mean, you can make a plan to fix a road, let's say in the Polo community. And you lock, if you go out here and lock that in, you may have the money in that, and you may have a flood come through down at Possum Trot and lock the whole road down, out like it did, you know, a year ago. Or
Yes, a couple of
about a year ago. It took the whole road out. The road became the creek bed. And you're locking the county judge in on this other one.
Well, if I could just respond, if you'll notice, this ordinance is non-designated. It's just money that's sitting there available to put in the
Well,
Possum
I
Trot
agree.
Road if it washes out. That's,
On this one, but we're talking about if you sit down and come up with a plan for roads in the future.
Lamont?
No, I never intended my concept of a county capital plan as micromanaging to that degree. I'm looking at, we have X number of dollars we pull in every year. We budget a portion of that. The rest of it becomes part of the reserve. We have money in the bank that we can use for long-term planning. Perhaps over the next 5 years, we want to dedicate X number of dollars per year for special road projects. And we're doing it on the basis of $200,000 a year. That's our plan, to have money set aside for capital acquisition. Same with the courthouse, the same with any major projects that we want to accomplish over the next 5 or 10 years. We're building up funds, and we're also doing it in an organized direction fashion, rather than just every time an ordinance comes up, we're going to transfer $200,000.
Don?
I'm number 3. One of the problems that we're facing here is that you can plan for something like the courthouse. That's a finite thing you can plan for. In looking at roads, it's infinite. I mean, you can't really sit here and come up with a road plan because the need is infinite. So, you know, I think you could tackle a capital plan for everything except roads. I don't know how you do a plan for roads.
Dan, you're next.
1, 2, 3, 4. I think we're all going to agree, and it's not going to be at variance with what you want to do, and I applaud that, having a fund designated out of carryover money to be used for a specific purpose. But I think we start to get on squishy ground, not to be cute, when we talk about roads being flooded out and all that, but when you designate it for, like John said, indefinite things like road work, much more reasonable to designate towards a capital equipment fund that allows you to do the road work when it needs to be done. It'd be hard to look at a taxpayer here and say, I've got $200,000, $500,000, or $1 million in a road fund that's designated to maybe fix bad roads. Because to me that ends up being kind of a backdoor tax. That money should be out there every day in the community fixing those roads as part of your regular budget. Much more reasonable to look at a taxpayer and say, I've got $200,000 or $500,000 or $1 million in the bank to buy equipment. And you have a plan for equipment purchases, which we've talked about. I think that would be a much better way to use a designated fund as opposed to material.
Joe?
I don't agree with Larry on it locks the judge in. Yeah, I can't see that. I mean, set up, he wouldn't have to lock him in, would it? Certain projects or anything?
Well,
Dan?
the way I see it is that the road department is the judges and road repair, like Larry, I agree with Larry on this one, because it does, if you have a committee and Larry and the judge is not in it, the committee says, we're going to do this, but we can't do that to the judge. It's his department. But the equipment idea, that we got this money set there to buy new trucks when it's time for them, and backhoes, and everything, that makes sense. But we cannot tell the judge what to do. The road department is 100% yes. That's it, 100%. That's why we don't want the phone calls when people say my road's bad. Just call the judge.
John, you're next.
I've got something. You know, I agree with Dan and Don. If we just designated it to equipment, that would allow more money out of the general carryover or whatever to go towards asphalt, base, whatever. So the designated fund, I would say that needed to be equipment. Although we are doing some big equipment purchases, and that need will be small in years to come. But really, $200,000 to set aside is a small amount looking for the future also. So I feel if we designate something each year.
Yeah, Ron.
Well, wait, I'm next. Like I said, I don't care what we do. I would like us to do something. We have a history of doing nothing. We talk and talk and do nothing. And we talk and talk and do nothing on most issues. And I would just like to see us do something towards building an ability to improve our roads in the county. The roads are the judge's. It's his choice. But he's got to have money to do it. And what we do is handle the money. That's all that we can really do is handle the money. This is talking about money. It's not telling the judge to buy a backhoe. It's not telling him to fix Road 219. It's not telling him to hire 3 more people. The judge handles the road department, but he's got to have money to do it, and that's where we come in. We handle the money. And our responsibility to the taxpayers is to handle the money responsibly and appropriately, and this is an attempt to do that. So that's all I have to say.
Okay.
I feel like damn some of them, if we just, it looks good, except maybe just say, this is reserved for equipment and supplies, or something like this, and when, equipment. And that way, when I'm sitting here looking at the pothole in front of my house, and I said, well, God, they got $2,000, we're going to do something, $200,000, why not to fix this pothole? That takes, because you're the one who gets all the calls on the potholes.
You get to next.
But I'm okay with it, just reword it a little bit, like you said, the earmark it a little bit better, where people think, well, we can just pull that out there and fix the potholes. I don't know.
Right.
Well, I kind of agree with Dan and John. I'm kind of leaning that way. I don't know if I tried or not.
Any more discussion?
The money's there regardless of what we do today. It's part of the road reserve. Whether we set aside $200,000 or $2, it's there. The Quorum Court, by a majority vote, can authorize X number of dollars to be spent above and beyond the budgeted amount for road work, if the judge recommends it and the Quorum Court accepts. To put $200,000 into a capital fund without any idea as to what the purpose is, it just doesn't seem to make any sense to me. So,
Well, that's the whole purpose of carryover, is just like the emergencies that we're talking about. It's there. And, we hit them hard times when, we dig deep into the carryover. And there's a reason we let it there. A reason it's there, a reason it's in county general. It's for the lean times or the emergency times. And so.
Any more? John?
I'd like to ask a question of Cindy. She may not know off the top of her head, but when we had those disasters 2 years ago and last year, how deeply did we dig into the reserve funds before we got FEMA money back in it to replace it? Do you remember how low it drew down before we received FEMA money back?
How low it got rolled?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure about that, but I do think that we drew out between $500,000 and $600,000.
783,000.
Okay.
So in that instance, we just barely had enough to cover it.
That million don't look as big.
The other alternative to that, we waited on repairs until FEMA wouldn't send money until we got the repairs done. We went out and borrowed money and done repairs till FEMA paid us. So there's your options.
If we hadn't had it on the hard outside company, we wouldn't have no money back if we'd owed it all.
Yeah.
Bo, you got anything to say on that?
On this thing, and this is just my idea on it, you know, setting aside the amount sounds good. It just needs to be fixed some way where everybody can agree, because you're looking at about $60,000 a mile, even on a chip and seal, to tear it up, go back and rework it, and then put a new chip and seal. So 200,000, you're looking at what, 3 miles? If everybody could agree with it still being in reserve, sitting there in reserve, if the judge comes along and says, look, we've got a 5-mile road over here that needs to be redone. Or by just voting at that time to either the funds for that or not. Would that be the same? You know, whatever road designated, got the money there. It's already in this fund. All you gotta do is transfer it. Well, I don't know. To me, that's what I would do. But, you know, there you go. It's up to you.
Mr. Goddard, we're gonna vote on it, or we're
Yeah,
gonna
let's
vote?
vote.
Let's vote on it.
Mr.
Call for
Blackburn?
vote.
I'm sorry, Sam. Mr. Blackburn?
Yes.
Mr. Deaton?
No, no, like it is.
Mr. Flake?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
No.
Mr. Howerton?
No.
Mr. McNeely?
No.
Mr. Mills?
Yes.
Mr. Mumma?
Nope.
Mr. Reed?
No.
Mr. Ritchie?
No.
Mr. Swafford?
No.
Thank you.
I'm proud to say we're carrying on our tradition of doing nothing.
Well, it was a very good discussion. I think something we're trying to do.
We'll see what comes.
Yes, we will.